Lecture 2, Law, Government, and Politics. In this lecture, we'll look at laws, governments that organize to make and enforce law, and the struggle over power within government, which is called politics. The law is a system of rules a community recognizes as regulating the actions of members and is enforced by penalties. Law is justice. Remember from our last lecture, we discussed Judaism's influence on the West. Judaism teaches us that God created and rules the earth, mankind is a brotherhood, and therefore men are to act justly. Moses received the law from God. In the Bible, you can read the details of this in Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. So what are God's laws? Well, first is the Decalogue, or the Ten Commandments. You read about it in Exodus 20, verses 1 through 17. And when I mention God's laws, I'm most likely talking about the Ten Commandments. They teach men how to love God and love others. They still apply today, and you can even find a picture of Moses with them at the U.S. Supreme Court. The Old Testament also has ceremonial laws, mainly instructions for priests and specific to Israel while they worshiped at the tabernacle. And there's Levitical laws that teach people to live holy lives. Some are specific to Israel, like laws about leprosy, but others, surprisingly, are quite relevant. But for our class, I want you to see there's a difference between God's laws, which are perfect, and man's laws, which are not. Thankfully for us, John Locke, an English philosopher, thought about this too. Today, we'll look at his thoughts in two treatises of government. Locke was one of several philosophers that talked about the social contract. This idea describes man's relationship with government. Men willingly give up a portion of their liberty for protection. And then government is organized to protect life, liberty, and property. Locke calls these natural rights. It is the people's duty to end governments that abuse their liberties. Now, this whole contract starts with the idea that men come into the world with certain rights. Locke calls them natural rights: life, liberty, and property. Locke may have been the first to write about natural rights, but I think Jefferson said it best. All men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Jefferson substitutes pursuit of happiness for Locke's property, but these are man's natural rights: life, liberty, and property. Let's define our terms. Life: man is created in the image of God, and all life is a gift from God. Liberty: the power or right to act, speak, or think as one chooses, so long as he does not harm anyone else. Property are the things that belong to someone, even your own labor. So, according to Locke, natural rights come from God, or as Jefferson beautifully put it, they're endowed by their Creator. So why must these rights be recognized as coming from God? Well, natural rights are superior to all human institutions, including government. God is perfect. Man is not. Natural rights are universal and eternal. But if these rights are merely gifts from one man to another, then they're small and temporary. Now, the second point: government is organized to protect life, liberty, and property. To do this, governments create civil law, laws enacted and enforced by governments. Think of this as man-made law. Obviously, this is not original to Locke. St. Augustine said that governments are created to protect good men from evil men, and really, he's only quoting St. Paul in 1 Timothy verse 1:9. The law is not laid down for the just, but for the lawless and disobedient, for the ungodly and sinners, for the unholy and profane. So, do you see the purpose of law? Government makes law to punish the evildoer and protect the innocent. There's laws against murder in order to protect life. There's laws against kidnapping in order to protect liberty. And there's laws against stealing in order to protect property. Remember that last point of the social contract? According to Locke and our own American history, it is the duty of the people to end governments that abuse the people's liberties. Earlier, I quoted Jefferson from the Declaration of Independence, and we're going to study his words and the American Revolution in detail soon. But this isn't just an American experience or even an English problem. Remember, this is about man and government, or at least what Western philosophers think about men and government. And in the West, people are more important than the government. The best thinking I've read on abusive governments comes from a Frenchman, Frédéric Bastiat. Bastiat had a short life, but contributed much to Western thought on economics and government. For us, it's his work defining law. Law is justice. The Law is his last essay, published just before his death. He had the benefit of seeing the results of the American and French revolutions. The law perverted is his first line. He gives examples of how the law, which is supposed to protect life, liberty, and property, your natural rights, is now guilty of the evils it's supposed to punish. The law has been corrupted for the benefit of the lawmaker and to the extent that they have the power to do so. In America, he highlighted slavery and tariffs as examples of corrupt law. A tariff is a tax on certain imports. Liberty is destroyed by oppression in slavery, and property is destroyed by plunder, by tariffs. Bastiat's most appealing argument to me is his assessment of education. He says government has two choices: allow education to flow freely, how it has occurred most often in human history, where parents decide and provide for their own children, or it can force human wills in this matter by taking from some of them enough to pay teachers who are appointed by government to instruct others without charge. Today, we call this arrangement public education. If one disagrees with public education or the taxes required to pay for it, the supporters of public education, Bastiat calls them socialists, then claim that person must be against education entirely. It's remarkable to me that this illustration was written in 1850 because it could just as easily apply today. This system of public education is, according to Bastiat, oppressive to the liberty of parents whose right it is to choose their children's education, and a plundering of the property of the people who have to pay the taxes to support education. Now, I'm not against public education. I do want to encourage you, however, to consider each law you come across as Bastiat would. Is this law protecting life, liberty, and property? Locke and Jefferson would then ask you, what's your duty? And speaking of government is the means by which a society organizes itself and allocates authority in order to accomplish collective goals. Government can force you to pay taxes, seize your property, and send you to jail. Let's look at some types of governments. Anarchy is the lack of government and law. There is great disorder. Think of Somalia or Afghanistan. Authoritarian government is rule by enforcing strict obedience to government. I think China is the best example. Theocracy is government by religious leaders. We see this today in Iran. A totalitarian government is rule by a dictator. Think of North Korea or Russia. An aristocracy is government by an upper-class minority. We see this in Thailand and in Saudi Arabia. An oligarchy is a government by a powerful few, sometimes the military, like in Egypt. Democracy is government in which people hold direct power. Really, the best example of this in history comes from ancient Athens. And finally, a republic is a government by elected representatives. We see this in France, the United States, Germany, and I'll put the United Kingdom in this group because their monarch is a figurehead and the real power is held by Parliament. The United States was established on a moral principle and is ruled by a written constitution. The Declaration of Independence is our nation's founding document. The United States is the only nation to be founded on the moral principle that all men are created equal. This is equality as a political value. All people are of equal worth. This isn't equality that we all have the same genes or the same size bank account. Let's practice a little comparative government. Remember who invented it? Did you say Aristotle? Okay, can you think of any other nations that believe all men are created equal? Me neither. The United States Constitution creates the national government, grants it power, and defines its relationship to the states. The United States is a constitutional republic, which means the government is made up of elected representatives and governed under the rule of law. The U.S. Constitution is the supreme law of the land and is as close to perfect as man has ever come in creating government. Politics is the process by which we decide how resources will be allocated and which policies government will pursue. I say politics is who gets what, when, and how, and everything is about politics, and informed individuals have more power. Think about the last time your family went out to eat. Did you all agree on where to go? What were the issues? Who decided? How did you make your opinion known? Were you successful? This is politics. Now let's think beyond your family. What's going on in your neighborhood? Any big projects in your city? What about elections for state or national offices? What do your parents think about these issues or elections? What about other family or friends? Have you seen any of these issues pop up on social media? Start looking for issues and for the reasons why people are for or against them. And this is really your first step in understanding political culture. Political culture is a set of ideas, values, and ways of thinking about government and politics that's shared by citizens. This is a map of Daniel Elazar's work on political subcultures. He defines several ways Americans look at government. The blue represents moralistic subculture. People in this group value high participation in government, spending, welfare, and taxes. You might have heard the term liberal to describe people in this group. They believe government is the answer to most problems, and they support voter registration drives, voting by mail, and declaring a voting holiday to encourage higher participation in elections. The yellow represents individualistic group. These people value internal motivation to participate in government. Libertarian is the word most often used today. They believe individual liberty is preferable to government intervention. For them, if you need motivation to vote, then your vote isn't worth having. And traditionalistic people value established principles and people. Conservatives describe this group accurately. They're slow to change. They hold the belief that if it's not broken, then why fix it? These people are likely to re-elect those in office already. Now, I made this map with data from 1966. How do you think political culture has shifted in the United States? What's the political culture where you live? Today, we've looked at laws, governments, and politics in pretty broad terms. Next time, we'll begin to narrow our focus.